I wasn't looking for anything that night. Honestly, I just wanted to disappear for a while. The bar was a last-minute choice, tucked away in a narrow street where the city's pulse felt a little softer. Work had been relentless deadlines, piling up emails that never stopped, and a boss who seemed to think I could bend time. Add to that the family group chat blowing up about my cousin's engagement, and I was drowning in everyone else's expectations. I needed a quiet corner, somewhere to sip a drink and let my thoughts untangle. That's all I wanted. But life, it turns out, doesn't care much about your plans. The place was called The Lantern, a dimly lit spot with exposed brick walls and mismatched wooden tables. It wasn't flashy, which was why I picked it. The kind of bar where people came to talk, not shout. I slipped onto a stool at the far end of the counter, away from the clusters of friends laughing over craft beers and the couple sharing a plate of fries in a booth. The bartender, a woman with a silver streak in her hair and a nonsense vibe, slid a whiskey my way without much chatter. Perfect. I wasn't in the mood for small talk. I was halfway through my drink, staring at the amber, liquid like it held some kind of answer, when I felt it a shift, like the air in the room got heavier. I glanced up, and there he was, Anton. I didn't know his name yet, but I couldn't look away. He was standing near the entrance, scanning the room like he wasn't sure he belonged. He had this presence, not loud or showy, but undeniable, like he carried a story in the way he moved. His hair was dark, curling just above his collar, and his eyes, God, those eyes caught the light in a way that made my chest tighten. He wore a navy sweater, sleeves pushed up to his elbows, and jeans that looked like they'd seen a few good years. There was something unpolished about him, but it worked. It worked too well. He caught me staring, and I froze. For a second, our eyes locked, and I swear the noise of the bar faded out. Then he smiled, just a small, lopsided thing, and I felt my face burn. I dropped my gaze back to my drink, heart thumping like I was a teenager again. What was wrong with me? I was 32, not some kid with a crush. But when I risked another glance, he was heading my way, weaving through the tables with this easy confidence that made my stomach twist. Is this seat taken? His voice was low, warm, with a hint of an accent I couldn't place something. Soft, maybe Eastern European. It rolled over me like a wave. I shook my head, words stuck somewhere in my throat. No, it's free. He slid onto the stool next to mine, close enough that I caught the faint scent of cedar and something sharper, like citrus. The bartender raised an eyebrow at him, and he ordered a gin and tonic, his fingers drumming lightly on the counter. I tried to focus on my drink, but my eyes kept drifting to his hands' long fingers. A silver ring on his thumb, a small scar across one knuckle. I wondered what that scar was from. I wondered a lot of things. You look like you're hiding, he said, turning to me with that same half smile. I laughed, caught off guard. Is it that obvious? Little bit. He tilted his head, studying me. Bad day, bad month, I admitted, surprising myself. I wasn't the type to spill my guts to strangers, but something about him made it easy. Work, family, the usual. Just needed a break from it all. He nodded, like he got it. I know that feeling. Sometimes you just need a place to breathe. Yeah. Exactly. I took a sip of my whiskey, feeling the burn steady me. What about you? You don't look like you're here to celebrate. He chuckled, a sound that felt like it could warm a room. No, not celebrating. Just passing through. Thought I'd stop in for a drink before I head home. Passing through, I raised an eyebrow. You make it sound like you're a drifter or something. Maybe I am, he said, his eyes glinting with mischief. Or maybe I just like places like this. They've got character. I glanced around at the scuffed floors and flickering Edison bulbs. Character's one way to put it. He laughed again, and I felt something loosen in my chest. We started talking, and it was easy. His name was Anton, he was 35, and he worked as a freelance photographer. He told me about chasing sunsets for the perfect shot, about the time he got stuck in a rainstorm in Iceland with nothing but a broken umbrella and a camera bag. I told him about my job in marketing, how it paid the bills but sometimes felt like I was selling pieces of my soul. We talked about the city, about music we liked, about the little things that made us laugh. It was the kind of conversation that felt like it could go on forever. But it wasn't just the talking. It was the way he listened, really listened, his eyes locked on mine like I was the only person in the room. It was the way his hand brushed mine when he reached for his drink, and neither of us pulled away. It was the way my heart kept tripping over itself, like it was trying to tell me something I wasn't ready to hear. I'd known I was gay since I was a kid, but I'd spent years keeping it quiet. My family wasn't cruel, but they weren't exactly waving pride flags either. Coming out in my 20s had been a slow, messy process, and dating always felt like walking a tightrope. I'd had flings, a couple of short relationships, but nothing that stuck. Nothing that felt like this, like I was standing on the edge of something big, something real. You're thinking too hard, Anton said, pulling me out of my head. He was leaning closer now, his elbow on the counter, his body angled toward mine. Maybe, I said, smiling despite myself, or maybe you're just distracting me. I'm harmless. But the way he said it, with that spark in his eyes, told me he was anything but. We stayed there for hours, the bar emptying out around us. The bartender started wiping down tables, giving us a look that said she wasn't kicking us out, but wouldn't mind if we left. Anton glanced at his watch and sighed. I should go. Early shoot tomorrow. My stomach sank, but I nodded. Yeah, me too. Work's not gonna let me sleep in. He hesitated, then pulled out his phone. Give me your number. I'd like to see you again. I froze, my brain scrambling. This was it, the moment where I could play it safe or take a chance. I typed my number into his phone, my fingers clumsy, and handed it back. Don't make me regret this, I said, half joking. He grinned. No promises. We walked out. Together, the night air cool against my skin. The street was quiet, just the hum of distant traffic and the glow of streetlights. Anton turned to me, and for a second I thought he might kiss me. Instead, he reached out and squeezed my shoulder, his touch lingering just long enough to make my breath catch. Night, he said, and then he was gone, disappearing round the corner. I stood there, heart pounding, feeling like I'd just woken up from a dream. I didn't know it then, but that night was the start of everything. The next few days were a blur. Work kept me busy, but Anton was always there, lingering in the back of my mind. His smile, his laugh, the way he'd looked at me like he saw something worth seeing. I kept checking my phone, hoping for a text, then cursing myself for acting like a lovesick kid. When it finally came, hey, it's Anton. Coffee this weekend. I nearly dropped my phone. We met at a little cafe near the park, the kind of place with wobbly tables and mismatched mugs. He was already there when I arrived, sitting by the window with a camera on the table in front of him. He looked up and smiled, and just like that, I was a mess again. Coffee turned into a walk through the park. Then dinner at a hole-in-the-wall taco place. Every time we met, it felt like we were picking up where we left off, like we'd known each other for years. He told me about growing up in a small town in Poland, moving to the States in his 20s, chasing a dream that didn't always pay the bills. I told him about my dad's endless lectures on settling down, about the pressure to be the perfect son, the perfect employee, the perfect everything. But it wasn't all easy. There were moments when I felt the weight of my own doubts. Was this too fast? Was I reading too much into it? I'd been hurt before guys who said all the right things and then ghosted, or worse, stuck around just long enough to make me feel small. Anton was different, but different scared me. What if I let myself fall and he wasn't there to catch me? One night, about a month in, we were at his place, a small apartment cluttered with camera gear and stacks of photo prints. We'd cooked dinner together well. He cooked, and I mostly chopped vegetables and tried not to burn anything. After, we were on his couch, a jazz record playing softly, the room lit by a single lamp. I was leaning against him, his arm around my shoulders. And it felt so good it almost hurt. "You're quiet tonight," he said, his voice soft. I shrugged, not sure how to explain the tangle in my chest. "Just thinking about," I hesitated. "This, us." "It's a lot," he shifted, turning to face me. "Good, a lot, or bad, a lot?" "Good," I said quickly, "but also scary. I don't know. I'm not great at this." He didn't laugh or brush it off. Instead, he reached for my hand, his thumb tracing slow circles over my skin. "You don't have to be great at it, just be here." I looked at him, at the warmth in his eyes, and something in me cracked open. "I'm trying," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He leaned in and kissed me then, slow and careful, like he was giving me time to pull away. I didn't. I kissed him back, and for the first time in a long time, I let myself feel each of it, the hope, the fear, the want. It was terrifying and perfect, and I didn't want it to end. Over the next few weeks, we fell into a rhythm. Dinners, late-night talks, walks through the city. He showed me his favorite spots, a hidden bookstore, a bridge with a view of the skyline that made the city feel almost magical. I showed him Mina diner that served the best milkshakes, a park bench where I used to sit and sketch when I was younger. It wasn't just about the places, though. It was about sharing them, about letting him into my world and stepping into his. But there were cracks, too. My family started asking questions, why I was always busy, why I seemed distracted. I hadn't told them about Anton, not yet. I wasn't sure how. My mum would probably be fine, but my dad, he'd have a million questions, none of them kind. And Anton had his own struggles. He talked about his work, how it was feast or famine, how he sometimes wondered if he'd made the right choices. There were nights when he'd go quiet, lost in his own head, and I'd wonder if I was enough to pull him back. One evening, we were at the Lantern again, back where it all started. It was colder now, the air sharp with the promise of winter. We were sharing a booth, our knees brushing under the table. He was telling me about a shoot he'd done that day, something for a local magazine, but I could tell his heart wasn't in it. "You okay?" I asked, nudging his foot with mine. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Just tired. Work's been tough, and I got a call from my sister today. She's going through some stuff back home. Want to talk about it?" He shook his head, but his hand found mine under the table, his fingers lacing through mine. "Not tonight. I'd rather just be here with you." I squeezed his hand, my chest aching. I wanted to fix it, to make everything okay for him, but I didn't know how. All I could do was be there, and maybe that was enough. As we left the bar, the city lights blurring around us, I realized something. This wasn't just a fling or a moment. This was real, and it was messy, and it was ours. I didn't know where it would go, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid to find out. That night at the lantern, when Anton held my hand under the table, something shifted. It wasn't just about the spark anymore, the thrill of something new. It was heavier, deeper, like we'd crossed a line into territory neither of us had mapped out. I didn't know if I was ready for it, but I knew I didn't want to turn back. Anton had become more than a quiet corner to escape to. He was starting to feel like home. The weeks that followed were a mix of magic and mess. We spent more time together, carving out moments in the chaos of our lives. Anton's apartment became a second home, its cluttered warmth a contrast to my sterile, overpriced studio. We'd cook together or try to my attempts at pierogi, inspired by his Polish roots, were a disaster. But he laughed so hard he nearly cried, and somehow that made it worth it. We'd sprawl on his couch, sharing a blanket, watching old movies, or just talking until the sky turned grey with dawn. Those moments felt like they could last forever, but life doesn't let you live in a bubble. Work was still a grind, and my family's questions were getting harder to dodge. My mom called. One Sunday, her voice bright but probing. "You sound different, sweetie. Happier. What's going on?" I mumbled something about a new project at work, but I could tell she wasn't buying it. Telling them about Anton felt like stepping onto thin ice. I wasn't sure if it would hold. My dad had softened over the years, but he still had this way of looking at me like he was waiting for me to figure things out. I wasn't ready to explain Anton to him, not when I was still figuring out what we were. Anton had his own battles. His photography gigs were unpredictable, and the stress was starting to show. He'd get quiet sometimes, his jaw tight, his eyes distant. I'd catch him staring at his laptop, scrolling through emails with a frown. One night, he told me about a big project that fell through a magazine spread he'd spent weeks preparing for. They went with someone else, he said, his voice flat. Someone cheaper. I reached for his hand, wishing I could fix it. "They're idiots. Your work's incredible." He gave me a small smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Thanks. Just feels like I'm running in place sometimes." I wanted to tell him he was enough, that he didn't need to prove anything, but words felt too small. Instead, I pulled him close, letting him lean into me. His head rested against my shoulder. And we stayed like that for a long time, the silence saying more than I could. About 2 months in, things got real in a way I hadn't expected. It was a Saturday, and we'd planned a day trip to a small town upstate, a place Anton said had a waterfall he wanted to photograph. The drive was easy, filled with music and laughter, his hand resting on my knee as the city gave way to rolling hills. The waterfall was tucked in a forest, the air sharp with pine and damp earth. Anton was in his element, his camera clicking as he moved around, chasing the light. I watched him, marveling at how he could make the world look new through his lens. We sat by the water after, sharing a thermos of coffee and a bag of sandwiches. The sun was low, painting the trees gold, and I felt this ache in my chest, not pain, but something bigger, something that scared me. I looked at him, his hair messy from the wind, his eyes soft as he watched the water, and I realized I was falling in love with him. Not the idea of him, but him scarred knuckles, quiet doubts, and all. "You're staring," he said, glancing at me with a grin. "Can't help it," I said, my voice catching. "You're kind of beautiful." He laughed, but there was something shy in it, like he wasn't used to hearing it. Then he leaned over and kissed me, soft and slow, and I felt like I could drown in it. But when we pulled apart, his expression shifted, a shadow crossing his face. "What's wrong?" I asked, my stomach twisting. He hesitated, picking at the grass between us. "I got an offer yesterday, a job, in London." My heart stopped. "London, as in England?" He nodded, not meeting my eyes. "It's a good one, a year-long contract, shooting for a travel magazine. It's the kind of thing I've been chasing forever." I tried to keep my voice steady. "That's amazing. Anton, really. But," he looked at me now, his eyes searching, "but what does that mean for us?" The words slipped out before I could stop them. He didn't answer right away, and that silence felt like a weight pressing down on me. "I don't know," he said finally. "I want this, you and me. But I need this job. I can't keep scraping by." I nodded, my throat tight. I wanted to be happy for him, and I was, but the thought of him leaving half a world away made my chest ache. "When do you have to decide?" "Next week," he said. I wanted to tell you sooner, but I didn't know how. We didn't talk about it for the rest of the day, but it hung between us, heavy and unspoken. The drive back was quieter, the music not quite enough to fill the space. When we got to his apartment, I almost left, thinking I needed time to process. But he grabbed my hand as I reached for my jacket. "Stay," he said, his voice soft but urgent. "Please." I stayed. We didn't talk about London or the future or anything big. We just held each other, his breath warm against my neck, and for that night, it was enough. The next week was torture. I threw myself into work, trying to drown out the what-ifs. Anton and I still saw each other, but there was a tension now, like we were both waiting for the other to say something that would make it all clear. I wanted to tell him to stay, but I couldn't. I knew what that job meant to him, how hard he'd fought to get to this point. Asking him to give it up felt like asking him to give up a piece of himself. One night, we were at my place, eating takeout on the floor because my table was covered in work papers. He was quieter than usual, picking at his food. Finally, he set his plate down and looked at me. "I told them no," he said. I froze, chopsticks halfway to my mouth. "What? The job?" I turned it down. I stared at him, my brain scrambling to catch up. "Why?" He took a deep breath, like he was steadying himself. "Because I want to be here. With you, I've spent years chasing things, jobs, dreams, whatever, but this, us. It's the first thing that's felt real in a long time." My heart was pounding, a mix of relief and fear. "Anton, are you sure?" That was a big deal. "I know," he said, his voice steady, "but so are you." I didn't know what to say. No one had ever chosen me like that, not in a way that felt so raw, so deliberate. I reached for him, pulling him into a kiss that felt like a promise, like a beginning. But even as I held him, a part of me wondered if I was worth it, if I could live up to what he was giving up. The months that followed were about building something real. We started talking about the future, not in a vague, dreamy way, but in the messy, practical sense. I introduced him to my friends, who loved him instantly, charmed by his stories and the way he made me laugh. He took me to a gallery show where some of his photos were displayed, and I watched him light up as people praised his work. It wasn't always easy. There were fights, small ones mostly, about stupid things like whose turn it was to do dishes or why I left my shoes in the middle of his floor, but we worked through them, learning each other's edges. I finally told my family about him. My mum was curious, asking a million questions about what he was like. My dad was quieter, but he didn't push back, just nodded and said, "As long as you're happy." It wasn't a ringing endorsement, but it was enough for now. Anton's sister came to visit from Poland, a whirlwind of energy with the same dark curls and sharp wit as her brother. She teased him mercilessly, but pulled me aside one night and said, "You're good for him. He's lighter now." It meant more than I could say. There were hard days too. Anton's work was still a struggle, and I had my own moments of doubt, wondering if I was enough, if we were enough. But we kept choosing each other over and over. We started talking about moving in together, about what it would mean to share a life. It scared me, but it was the good kind of scared, the kind that comes with wanting something so much it hurts. One evening, almost a year after we met, we were back at the Lantern. It felt like a full circle moment, sitting in the same booth where we'd first held hands. The bar hadn't changed much, the same scuffed floors, the same warm glow. But we had. I looked at Anton, his face lit by the soft light, and I felt it again, that ache. That certainty that this was where I was meant to be. "You know," I said, leaning back in the booth, "I came here that first night, just looking for a quiet corner. I didn't expect this." He smiled, that lopsided grin that still made my heart skip. "Me neither, but I'm glad you were here." I reached for his hand, my fingers tracing the scar on his knuckle. Me too. We didn't have all the answers. Life was still messy, full of bills and family drama and dreams that didn't always work out. But we had each other, and that was more than a moment. It was a beginning, a foundation, a promise we'd keep building on day by day.